I arrived at my own divorce hearing with my 12-day-old daughter in my arms and found my wife beside her lover. When I dropped my envelope, she whispered, "That house was never yours, Caleb." Her lawyer went pale. June was 12 days old when I walked into the room where my marriage ended. I want you to understand what 12 days old means when you are the only parent acting like a parent. It means time stops being measured by clocks and starts being measured by ounces, diapers, burps, and the terror of checking whether a tiny chest is still rising at 3:17 in the morning. It means my shirt had dried formula on the shoulder. It means I had not slept more than 90 minutes at once since Lydia brought us home from the hospital, and quietly returned to work emails like childbirth had been a scheduling inconvenience. It means every sound June made entered my nervous system before it reached my ears. I carried her against my chest in a cream blanket with little gray moons on it. She was asleep, one hand curled under her chin, trusting the room because I was holding her, and she did not yet know rooms could be dangerous. The conference room was on the 14th floor downtown. Dark wood table, glass walls, the kind of room designed to make human pain feel like a transaction. Lydia sat across from me in a charcoal suit, face composed. To her right sat Miles Rourke, her lover, wearing the expression of a man attending a closing he assumed had already funded. Lydia did not look at June. Not once. That landed somewhere I did not have time to examine. Her attorney, Gerald Morrow, arranged his folders. My lawyer, Adrian Cole, sat beside me. Maya Chin opened her laptop. Lydia slid a manila folder across the polished table. "Sign the papers, Caleb," she said. "Take the settlement and make this easier for everyone." Everyone. That word did a lot of work for her. June shifted against my chest. I adjusted the blanket, keeping one hand under her head, because even in a room built to take things from me, she was still the one thing I knew how to hold correctly. I reached into my bag. Not for a pen. For my envelope. My name is Caleb Warren. I am 35 years old, and before my life became bottles and a daughter small enough to sleep against my ribs, I spent 8 years as a forensic accountant. That job changes the way you see the world. Other people notice moods. I notice gaps, missing invoice numbers, transfers rounded too neatly, business entities with names designed to sound boring enough to ignore. Lydia used to call it paranoia when we were fighting, and charming when her friends needed someone to look at a charitable foundation's books. I noticed the first discrepancy when she was 11 weeks pregnant. $52,000 moved from our investment account into a holding entity I did not recognize. Cypress Gate Administrative Partners. The name sounded like something created to be forgotten. I asked Lydia about it that evening while she stood at the kitchen island scrolling through her phone. "Capital allocation," she said. "Temporary structure for a client-side opportunity." Then she smiled without looking up. "Nothing you need to worry about in detail." That sentence had carried us through years of marriage. I nodded. Then, after she went to bed, I wrote the entity name in the Notes app under a grocery list and photographed the transfer record. The second discrepancy arrived in March through an error Lydia would never have made if she thought I still mattered. An email notification hit my old inbox from the Stonebridge property management account. Lydia had forgotten to remove me as a contact. The subject line was ordinary. Policy update confirmation. Stonebridge House was the 5-bedroom place 40 minutes outside Nashville, where Lydia once stood in the front room, hands on her stomach, and told me June would learn to walk under those windows. Now its insurance had been switched to a commercial rate structure. Residential properties do not become commercial unless someone is preparing them to be held, leased, transferred, or sold through a structure that wants distance from the people living in the story. I wrote down the policy number. Then I pulled county records. The deed had been transferred 3 months earlier to Cypress Gate Holdings, LLC. Not Lydia. Not me. Not our marital estate. A shell company with a registered agent in Austin and no listed principals. I sat there staring at the screen while June kicked inside Lydia across the hall. Stonebridge had already started disappearing. Over the next 9 months, I built the case in pieces small enough to hide inside ordinary life. Lydia left for work early, came home late, and started sleeping with her phone face down. I used the hours she considered beneath her notice. I recovered deleted emails through an account tool she had never bothered to disconnect from our shared cloud. I matched wire transfers against property records in Tennessee, Texas, Delaware, and Wyoming. I pulled business filings at 2 a.m. while June was still only a shifting weight under Lydia's ribs, and later, after June was born, while warming bottles with one hand and downloading PDFs with the other. There is a specific kind of loneliness in investigating your own marriage. You are not just looking for proof that someone lied. You are hoping, stupidly, that the next document will prove they did not. It never did. The worst thing I found was not the LLC structure or the offshore intermediary reference. It was a text chain between Lydia and Miles Rourke, her broker. Then, I would learn something more. Miles wrote, "Stonebridge needs to be cleaned before the baby makes the optics impossible." Lydia replied, "I know. Caleb will sign if custody gets messy." I read that at 3:48 in the morning, while June's future nursery sat half-painted down the hall. That was when something in me stopped arguing with reality. My daughter was not even born yet, and they had already made her leverage on paper already. I called Adrian Cole the morning after I found Lydia's message about custody getting messy. He came recommended by a former colleague who said, "If your wife's lawyer sees Adrian across the table, they will stop smiling before he opens his briefcase." 26 years in high-net-worth divorce and asset recovery. Quiet voice. Dangerous patience. He listened for 11 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "How much is documented?" "Enough to scare me," I said. "That is not a unit of measurement, Mr. Warren. Transfers, property records, LLC filings, deleted emails, text chains, insurance notices, and a partial offshore trail." The line went still. "Can you come in Thursday?" "I have a newborn." "Bring her," he said. "I have a couch." His office was on the 10th floor of a building that smelled like wood and people making expensive mistakes. June slept in her carrier while I spread 9 months across his conference table. There is something obscene about watching strangers organize your betrayal. Adrian did not react theatrically. Neither did Maya Chun, his associate, 7 years in financial litigation, and the kind of focus that made silence feel like pressure. They moved through the documents in order. Cypress Gate Administrative Partners. Cypress Gate Holdings LLC. Stonebridge Deed Transfer. Commercial Insurance Change. Text chain with Miles. Wire transfers routed just below reporting thresholds. Maya stopped on the phrase "clean before the baby makes the optics impossible." Her pen hovered above the legal pad. She wrote, "Custody gets messy?" Adrian asked. "Yes." He looked at June, then back at the papers. That was the first time his face changed. Not pity. I would have hated pity. Recognition. "This is not just a divorce," he said. "This is a marital asset concealment case with fraudulent transfer issues. If the custody language connects to financial pressure, it gets uglier." "I know." "She is going to call you unstable." "I know too." "She will use exhaustion, new fatherhood, fear, anything." I looked at my daughter sleeping through the meeting that would decide her future. "I have been holding up for 9 months, I said. "I can hold up a little longer." June was 4 days old when Lydia served me divorce papers. She did not call them that at first. She came into the living room at 7:12 a.m. wearing a navy suit, hair still damp from the shower, smelling like citrus shampoo and coffee she had not made herself. I was in the chair by the window with June against my chest, counting the tiny pauses between her breaths because new fathers do irrational things and call them vigilance. Lydia set a manila envelope on the coffee table. "My lawyer will be in touch about the meeting," she said. I looked at the envelope, then at her. "Lydia." She checked her watch. "I can't do this right now." June made a small sound, not a cry, just one of those newborn noises that means nothing and everything when you are the person listening for them. Lydia did not look down. She had held our daughter for 43 seconds in the hospital. I knew because I counted. She had touched June's cheek once after we came home, then said she was exhausted and needed space. Then she left for work. I opened the envelope with one hand while holding my daughter with the other. The proposed settlement was 42 pages. No-fault dissolution. Sale of our primary residence. Proceeds divided 65/35 in Lydia's favor. A one-time payment to me of $210,000. No spousal support. Custody described as flexible shared access, which is lawyer language for a future argument. There was no mention of Stonebridge. Not one word about the house where Lydia had promised our daughter would grow up. I texted Adrian. She filed. Settlement excludes Stonebridge entirely. Meeting in 8 days. He replied 4 minutes later. "Good. We're ready." I looked at June sleeping against me. "We are," I whispered. For the next 8 days, I did 2 things. I cared for June, and I waited. That sounds passive if you have never waited with evidence. It is not passive. It is controlled violence against every instinct telling you to confront, accuse, beg, or burn the house down just to feel heat somewhere other than your own chest. Adrian told me not to respond emotionally. So I did not. Lydia texted twice about the meeting logistics. I answered like a man confirming a dental appointment. She came home late, slept in the guest room, and referred to June's feeding schedule as your system, as if our daughter were a filing method I had overcommit to. I wrote everything down. Times Lydia left. Times she returned. Every message. Every refusal to hold June longer than necessary for appearances. At 2 a.m., I fed my daughter in the blue light of the kitchen and reviewed the settlement again on my phone. Stonebridge was missing. Cypress Gate was missing. The wire transfers were missing. The whole shape of Lydia's plan was defined by what she thought I would be too tired to notice. Adrian called on day 6. "Any second thoughts?" "About the divorce?" "About using the evidence in the room." June hiccuped against my shoulder. I looked at her tiny hand gripping the collar of my shirt, like she already understood possession better than the adults trying to move houses on paper. "No," I said. "I'm done protecting the version of her I hoped was real." "Good," Adrian said. "Bring the envelope. Let them speak first." So I waited. Not weak. Not uncertain. Just ready. That was the strategy. Let confidence make them careless before documents made them quiet in public first. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a downtown Nashville building that had been designed to make disagreement feel expensive. Dark walnut table. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Water bottles lined up with labels facing the same direction. The kind of room where people use the word reasonable right before asking you to surrender something you cannot replace. Lydia's legal team already occupied one side when I walked in. Gerald Morrow sat nearest the center, silver hair, navy tie, hands folded over a stack of folders. 2 associates flanked him with laptops open, faces arranged into professional neutrality. Lydia sat beside Gerald in a charcoal suit I had bought her for a promotion dinner 2 years earlier. And to her right sat Miles Rourke. That was not normal. A lover has no legal standing in a divorce negotiation. A broker with an overlapping business relationship has even less reason to be in the room, unless the point is not legal relevance. The point was performance. Miles wore a dark suit and the relaxed expression of a man invited to witness a closing. He glanced at June, then away too quickly, like even he understood a 12-day-old baby made the victory uglier. Lydia did not look at June at all. That was the part one kept noticing. Not Miles. Not Gerald's folders. Not the way Lydia's wedding ring was already gone. My daughter made one soft sound against my chest, and her mother did not even blink. Adrian sat to my right. Maya sat to my left with her laptop open and the envelope centered in front of her like a sealed verdict. Gerald began with politeness. We all understand this is an emotional time. I almost smiled. That sentence told me they had built the whole strategy around making my exhaustion look like instability. Lydia leaned back. She believed this meeting was where I lost. That was her first mistake publicly. Lydia let Gerald do the opening performance. He talked about minimizing disruption, protecting June from prolonged conflict, and reaching an efficient resolution before emotions hardened into litigation. He said all of it while Miles sat beside my wife like proof that she had moved on from the family he was pretending to protect. Then Lydia slid the settlement folder toward me. Sign it, Caleb, she said. Take the money and be reasonable. Reasonable. I looked down at June. Her mouth moved in her sleep, searching for a bottle that was not there. 12 days old, and being used as an argument by people who had not learned the shape of her hand. I reached into my bag and took out my envelope. Plain manila, no label, no drama. I placed it directly on top of Lydia's settlement folder. Gerald's polite expression tightened. Before I sign anything, I said, someone needs to explain what happened to Stonebridge. Lydia blinked too slowly. Gerald opened the envelope. The first page was the county deed transfer showing Stonebridge House moved into Cypress Gate Holdings LLC 3 months earlier. The second was the commercial insurance update. The third was the Austin registered agent listing. Behind that were screenshots of wire transfers, the notary record, and the text chain where Miles had written about cleaning the slate before the baby made the optics impossible. Gerald read the first page. Then the second. By the third, the color left his face in a way legal training could not hide. He looked at Lydia. Not at me. At his own client. That mattered. Because whatever Gerald Morrow had prepared for that morning, it clearly had not included discovering in real time that his client had hidden a house from the settlement he had just asked me to sign. For one full second, nobody spoke. That was how I knew the document had landed exactly correctly. People think power sounds like yelling. In rooms like that, real power is usually silence while someone redoes the math in their head and realizes the numbers no longer protect them. Gerald Morrow set the deed transfer down. Lydia, he said, and there was warning inside her name. She ignored him. This is private financial structuring, she said. You are overreaching. Miles turned toward her. What Stonebridge property? The question was soft with surprise. Until that moment, Miles had looked like a man who had been told he was attending the final scene. Now he looked like someone realizing he had not been shown the full script. I looked at him. The 5-bedroom house Lydia took me to on our 3rd anniversary, I said. The one with the tall windows in the front room. She told me our daughter would learn to walk there. June shifted against my chest, her cheek warm through my shirt. Lydia stood. Gerald reached for her arm and missed. You have no idea what you are doing, she said. You have no idea how badly this can go for you. There it was. Not denial. Threat. Adrian did not move. Maya's fingers hovered over her keyboard. I adjusted June's blanket before I answered, because the smallest human in that room deserved steadier hands than the adults around her. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. I know you transferred Stonebridge into Cypress Gate 3 months ago. I know you changed the insurance classification. I know you left it out of a sworn settlement proposal. And I know you thought 12 days without sleep would make me desperate enough to sign anything with a custody paragraph attached. Lydia's eyes flicked to June. Not love. Calculation. That hurt more than I expected. You mistook exhaustion for weakness, I said. Then I looked at Gerald. That's been her recurring error. Then Gerald's phone vibrated on the table. He looked down once, and the careful professional mask he had been rebuilding cracked again. Adrian's phone buzzed almost immediately after. He answered, listened for less than 15 seconds, and wrote one sentence on his legal pad. Then he closed his folder. Mr. Morrow, Adrian said, negotiations are suspended. Gerald's eyes narrowed. On what basis? On the basis that your client's representative attempted an off-market sale of Stonebridge House 45 minutes ago. The room changed temperature. Maya turned her laptop slightly toward me. On the screen was a county recorder alert, timestamped that morning, tied to the monitoring protocol Adrian had placed on the property 6 weeks earlier. A transfer packet had been submitted through an escrow contact connected to Miles Rourke's brokerage network. Miles leaned forward. My brokerage didn't file that. No, Maya said. An associate did, under a sale instruction routed from Lydia's office. Lydia's face went hard. Adrian continued, calm as a locked door. Attempted sale or transfer of a concealed marital asset during active divorce negotiations constitutes asset dissipation. We will be seeking immediate injunctive relief. Gerald looked at Lydia again. This time, the warning in his expression was not subtle. Lydia stared at me across the table, past the envelope, past the baby, past every document that had interrupted the story she had written. Then the performance finally ran out. That house was never yours, Caleb, she said. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Almost quietly. Like she was telling me the weather. That was the moment I understood this had never been a mistake, or panic, or bad legal advice. It was belief. She believed June's home belonged to her because she had wanted it badly enough. I looked at my wife and said, then let the court explain county records to you. That was why the records existed. 2 days later, Miles Rourke called me. I almost let it go to voicemail. The only reason I answered was because Adrian had told me to document every contact, and because 9 months of this had taught me that useful information rarely arrives wearing a clean uniform. Miles asked to meet at a diner off Charlotte Avenue, the kind with chrome edges, coffee, and waitresses who have seen enough human damage to stop looking surprised by it. I brought June. That was not strategic. That was fatherhood. At 14 days old, she went where I went. Miles was already in a back booth when I arrived. No dark victory suit. No relaxed broker smile. Just a gray sweater, unshaved jaw, and both hands around a mug he had not been drinking from. He looked at June in her carrier. How old is she now? He asked. 14 days. Something moved through his face. Not guilt exactly. Recognition, maybe. He slid a silver USB drive across the table. I cloned Lydia's hard drive 6 weeks ago, he said. I looked at the drive, then back at him. Why? Because I started realizing she only tells people the version that keeps them useful. That sounded familiar enough to hurt. Miles swallowed. She told me you were unstable, controlling, that the baby might not even be yours, and you were using custody to trap her. My hand tightened around the carrier handle. I never believed the paternity part, he said, but I wanted insurance. Against Lydia? Against becoming you, he said. That was the first honest thing I had heard from him. He pushed the drive closer. There is an audio file on there. Her mother, Eleanor. I listened to it last night. His voice thinned. You need to hear it before court. June made a sleeping sound between us. For once, Miles looked ashamed to be in the same room as her. Adrian and Maya came to my apartment that night. June was asleep in the bassinet beside the couch, one fist pressed like she had taken a position on the world and was prepared to defend it. Maya used a clean laptop that had never touched our home network. Adrian watched the screen without drinking the coffee I made him. The USB was not messy. That made it worse. Lydia had folders labeled by year, property, entity, and attorney. Offshore accounts routed through a Cayman intermediary. Six-figure balances built through transfers under reporting thresholds. Shell LLC registrations in Texas, Delaware, and Wyoming. Cypress Gate appeared everywhere, not as a mistake, but as a spine. Stonebridge was only one rib. There were email chains between Lydia, Gerald Morrow, and a notary named Martin Phelps, mapping property transfers in the kind of language people use when they have forgotten clean language can still describe fraud. Maya stopped at a folder labeled Family. Inside were audio files. The one Miles mentioned had been recorded 3 months earlier. Adrian looked at me before pressing play. You can stop this whenever you want. No, I said. He clicked. Eleanor Vance's voice filled my living room. Calm. Educated. Certain. The voice of a woman who had hosted Christmas dinners and corrected my grip on a wine glass while smiling at me like I was temporary furniture. I don't care what the hospital records show, Eleanor said. Do not acknowledge him as the father until Caleb signs away Stonebridge. My body went still. Not my hands. Not my face. Something deeper. Then Lydia's voice answered, low and tired. What about June? Eleanor made a sound. That baby is leverage until the papers are signed. June slept 8 feet away while her grandmother turned her into strategy. Maya paused the file. Nobody spoke. Then I said, play the rest. The rest of the audio was worse because it was practical. Eleanor did not sound angry. Angry people can be dismissed. She sounded organized. Starve him out, she said. Limit access to the accounts. Make custody uncertain. Men like Caleb panic when they think someone can take their child. He is alone, exhausted, and sentimental. He will sign anything if the pressure is sufficient. Lydia was quiet for a moment. He loves her, she said. Good, Eleanor replied. Then use that. That was the first time I understood the real shape of the case. They were not just hiding money. They were trying to turn my daughter into a lockpick for my fear. Adrian said nothing. He did not need to. The recording had already said enough. The morning of the hearing, I was awake at 4:15. Not because June cried. She was asleep in the bassinet, fists tucked under her chin, breathing in those small, uneven waves that had become the only metronome I trusted. I was awake because some days carry weight before they arrive. I warmed a bottle in the kitchen with the lights low and held her against my chest while she drank. Her eyes stayed half open, unfocused, as if the world was still deciding how much of itself to show her. We're going to be okay, I told her. It was the kind of promise adults make to children when what they really mean is, I have done everything I can. By 9, we were in Judge Marisol Keene's courtroom. Keene had been on the family bench for 18 years. Adrian described her as technically rigorous and allergic to theater. For days earlier, she had ordered expedited DNA testing after Lydia's side-implied paternity was disputed. Lydia arrived with Gerald Morrow, 2 associates, a financial expert, and Eleanor Vance, sitting like a woman annoyed the legal system had scheduled itself around her mourning. Then the doors opened again. Blazer, no broker shine, no victory posture. He crossed the aisle and sat directly behind me. I heard Lydia whisper, "What the hell are you doing?" Miles did not look at her. For the first time, I breathed again. Gerald Morrow performed for 45 minutes. That is the only word for it. He did not argue so much as arrange a version of me on the table and invite Judge Keene to inspect it. Caleb Warren, exhausted new father. Caleb Warren, former forensic accountant with too much technical confidence and not enough distance. Caleb Warren, a man so frightened of losing his daughter that he had started seeing conspiracy in ordinary financial planning. He said Lydia had been patient. He said Lydia had returned to work because someone had to maintain stability. He said the transfers were legitimate business structuring, the LLC's common asset management vehicles, the Stonebridge insurance change and administrative adjustment that I had misunderstood because I was sleep-deprived and reactive. Every time he said sleep-deprived, his voice softened. Like the words themselves were a diagnosis. June slept against my chest through most of it. Her face was turned toward my shirt, mouth open slightly, warm and real, and completely uninterested in Gerald's effort to turn her days alive into evidence against me. Then he moved to custody. That was when Adrian's pen stopped moving. Gerald described Lydia as a devoted mother navigating a separation from a spouse who had become controlling about routine. He said I had isolated June, that I resisted help, that I treated Lydia's work obligations as abandonment. Eleanor sat behind Lydia with her hands folded, listening to the story she had helped design. I felt anger move through me. Not hot. Heavy. Because the worst part was how polished it sounded. A stranger hearing only that performance might believe it. They might imagine me pacing at 3 a.m., paranoid and possessive, while Lydia tried to keep a family functional. That is what money buys first. Vocabulary. Judge Keene let Gerald finish. Then she looked at me. I did not speak. Adrian had warned me that reacting would feed their version. So I held June, kept my face still, and let them call exhaustion instability. They were about to learn the difference between a tired man and an unprepared one. Adrian stood slowly, the way men stand when they do not need volume because the documents are already louder than anyone in the room. He submitted the bank records first. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, Cypress Gate entities, the Stonebridge deed transfer, the county recorder alert from the attempted sale. Each exhibit entered with source, timestamp, and chain of custody clean enough that Gerald stopped objecting halfway through and started taking notes. Then Maya entered the text chain. Clean the slate before the baby makes the optics impossible. Judge Keene read it once. Her expression did not change, which somehow made it worse. Adrian said, "Your Honor, the respondent's theory is that my client is misreading ordinary financial planning because he is exhausted. The evidence shows coordinated concealment before the child was born, then pressure applied after birth to force a settlement." Maya clicked the audio file. Eleanor's voice filled the courtroom. Starve him out. Limit access to the accounts. Make custody uncertain. Men like Caleb panic when they think someone can take their child. No one moved. Not Lydia. Not Gerald. Not Eleanor, though her chin lifted, as if dignity could outrun a speaker system. The recording continued. He will sign anything if the pressure is sufficient. June stirred against my chest. I put one hand over her back. The room had gone so quiet I could hear my daughter breathing through the silence they had built around her. Judge Keene opened the sealed envelope with a letter opener. The sound of paper was the only thing moving in that courtroom. The court ordered expedited DNA analysis in this matter, she said. Results have been returned. Lydia stared straight ahead. I felt June's weight against my chest, heavier than every document on that table. Judge Keene read from the page. With 99.9% certainty, the biological paternity of June Elise Warren is confirmed as Caleb Michael Warren. Something broke on Lydia's side of the room. Not a scream. A sound smaller than that. The sound of a strategy collapsing into the human being it had tried to erase. Eleanor shut her eyes. Gerald did not look at his client. Judge Keene set the document down. The court finds substantial evidence of asset concealment, fraudulent transfer, and coordinated financial pressure connected to custody uncertainty. All respondent-controlled marital assets are hereby frozen pending full forensic review. Her pen moved once. Stonebridge House is restored to the marital estate pending equitable distribution analysis. Then she turned the page. Primary physical custody of June Elise Warren is granted to the petitioner, Caleb Warren. Respondent Lydia Vance Warren is limited to supervised visitation pending parental fitness review and the outcome of the financial fraud investigation. I looked down at my daughter. She was asleep. She had no idea the room had just stopped treating her like leverage. That was justice to me. Eleanor Vance stood before the judge could leave the bench. That is my granddaughter, she said, voice sharp enough to make people turn. She has Vance blood. Whatever Lydia did, I have rights. For 18 years, I had been polite to older women at family tables. That morning, with June asleep against me and Eleanor's voice still echoing from the speakers, politeness felt like another cage. I turned around. 3 weeks ago, I said, she was that baby. Eleanor froze. You said you did not care what the records showed. You told Lydia to use my fear of losing her until I signed. I held her eyes. You do not get to claim her now just because the optics changed. Martin Phelps surrendered his notary commission 12 days after the hearing. Adrian called it cooperation. Maya called it survival. I called it the first honest signature in the case. Phelps gave investigators the transfer packets, escrow emails, and a written statement confirming Lydia's office had coordinated the Stonebridge transfer through Cypress Gate Holdings while preparing a divorce settlement that omitted the property. The district attorney filed 4 counts against Lydia, 2 counts of fraudulent transfer, 1 count tied to false disclosure in a sworn settlement document, and 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the marital estate. Gerald Morrow withdrew from representation the following week. His letter was brief, professional, bloodless. It cited an irreparable breakdown in trust, which is lawyer language for my client lied to me so badly I cannot stand beside her without catching fire. Forensic review took 3 months. 3 months of subpoenas, account tracing, offshore records, confirmations, and Adrian reminding me that slow law was still law. When the final settlement came, Stonebridge was restored to the marital estate. The hidden accounts were included, and Lydia's original offer looked less like negotiation and more like evidence. Adrian described the outcome as substantially favorable. That meant I could keep June safe. So I accepted the understatement gratefully. Miles Rourke was not charged. That made people angry when they heard the story later, and I understand why. He had been in the room. He had sat beside my wife while I held a 12-day-old baby and kept my hand steady. He was not innocent. But innocence is not the only category after damage. Miles had witnessed conduct he did not initiate, kept evidence for selfish reasons at first, then handed it over when it mattered. The USB changed the case. The audio changed the room. We are not friends. I do not forgive him in the warm, cinematic way people expect. I simply decided he had done the right thing finally, and that required no sentencing from me. June is 11 months old now. She pulls herself to standing along the edge of the coffee table, one hand planted, knees shaking, face wide with the outrage and delight of discovering gravity has opinions. When she falls, she looks surprised for half a second. Then she laughs. That laugh is the sound I wish I could have brought into the courtroom with me months earlier, not as evidence, as proof of what they had tried to reduce into leverage, optics, custody pressure, and settlement language. She does not know any of this. She should not. Not yet. Someday, when she is old enough to ask why there are no pictures of her mother in the hallway, I will tell her the truth in a version that fits the size of her heart at the time. I will tell her she was 12 days old when I carried her into a room where adults treated her future like a negotiation term. I will tell her I was tired. I will tell her I was scared. And I will tell her fear did not get to sign for me. She will know Stonebridge was waiting for her. She will know I put papers on the table anyway, with both hands steady. Lydia thought I would sign because I was tired. She was not wrong about the tired part. There were mornings when I put the bottle in the sink and forgot why I had walked into the kitchen. Nights when June cried and I cried too, quietly, because fathers are taught to call fear logistics until it becomes easier to carry. Days when every email from Adrian looked like one more hill to climb with a baby strapped to my chest and no sleep behind my eyes. But exhaustion is not defeat. That is what Lydia forgot. I had built the case before June was born. While Lydia hid properties and rehearsed custody pressure, I was saving county records, matching transfers, photographing documents, and learning the exact shape of every lie she thought I would miss. She whispered that Stonebridge was never mine like it was the final word. It was not. County records had words. Bank statements had words. Text messages had words. Audio files had words. DNA had words too. Together, they said what I was too tired to shout. I came prepared to burn everything down. In the end, I did not have to. The evidence did what anger never could. It stood up in a room full of people and told the truth for me in full.